Under the blinding lights of New York City, a city that never sleeps and never stops watching, a name echoed louder than ever: Jungkook. His solo concert in NYC wasn't just another global event. It became a state-level concern, not because of the performance itself, but because of the man behind the curtain sounding the alarm before the first note was even sung. That man? Jin of BTS. The concert date had just been confirmed when murmurs turned into headlines. Jungkook would take the stage solo, for the first time in NYC, at an arena that had previously hosted legends. Tickets sold out in seconds. Fans from across the globe booked flights. Hotels in Manhattan saw sudden spikes in reservations. Social media exploded. But the celebration was cut short by one unexpected twist. Jin personally contacted Bigot and urged them to escalate security beyond standard measures. That message wasn't taken lightly. It wasn't just a typical "be careful" call. It was a directive. An urgent, almost desperate request from someone who'd seen too much, who knew too well what fame could attract. Jin, freshly discharged from the military, had reportedly reviewed troubling intelligence, or at least personal warnings, that led him to act. Sources close to the agency claim Jin didn't just speak to internal security. He asked Bigot to get in touch with US government officials. He wanted federal-level protection. He wanted guarantees, AT first. Many thought it was a rumor, a fan theory gone viral. But then a closed-door meeting between Bigot's top executives and a US security consultant leaked. A document marked urgent. Jungkook NYC security protocol began circulating internally, later confirmed by a contractor who spoke under anonymity. According to this document, security wasn't just being increased. The venue would be swept by the NYPD bomb squad. Drones would patrol the airspace. Jungkook's dressing room would have bulletproof enhancements. And Homeland Security would be looped in, just in case. Why? That question is what shook the fandom to its core. Why would Jin, known for his calm demeanor and protective instincts, feel compelled to go to these lengths? Why now? Just as things were supposed to feel normal again for months, Jungkook had tried to keep a low profile post-military. He hadn't spoken publicly about personal threats, but armies have long documented the troubling rise in saying activities, obsessive stalker fans, targeting BTS, particularly Jungkook, leaked addresses, invasive tracking, threats disguised as letters. There were even rumors of devices planted in gifts. But Jungkook, ever the professional, never let it show. He smiled through every fan sign, waved at every airport, and gave his all on every stage. But Jin saw what fans didn't. He had witnessed the sleepless nights, the sudden switches in security detail, the tightening of privacy boundaries. And now, faced with a massive, open-to-public event on American soil, Jin wasn't willing to risk it. Not even a little. The deeper story came into light when a former US intelligence official, now working as a private consultant for global event security, confirmed that a Korean superstar concert had triggered unusual concern due to online chatter. "We picked up some noise," he said in a rare interview. "Encrypted forums, burner accounts, conversations that didn't sit right. It wasn't a confirmed threat, but it wasn't something you ignore." The timing aligned too perfectly. Jin's call to Bigot happened 2 days after the chatter spiked. He didn't wait for verification. He didn't need to. He trusted his instincts, and those instincts pointed toward danger. And so, the narrative shifted. What was meant to be a celebration, a triumphant return of one of Korea's brightest stars, turned into a high-stakes operation. Fans arriving in NYC were met with security lines unlike anything they'd seen before. Metal detectors were doubled. No bags allowed. Surveillance vans circled the venue. And yet, amidst all that, the energy never dipped. If anything, it intensified. Because now, this wasn't just a concert. It was a statement. Jungkook didn't cancel. Despite the growing concerns, despite the high-profile warnings, despite Jin's plea for caution, Jungkook showed up. And that's when the world saw not just an artist, but a man who refused to be silenced by fear. He walked on stage, under lights brighter than most could bear, and performed like his life wasn't under surveillance. But it was Jin, according to Bigot insiders, had flown to the US in secret. He didn't attend the concert publicly, but he was there, hidden in a booth, watching every moment. There was even talk that he had hired an external private detail, trained in tactical intervention, to monitor from rooftops. Was it excessive? Maybe. But to Jin, it was necessary. He told us, one source at Bigot said, that if something happened to Jungkook, he'd never forgive himself. And neither would the company. The emotional weight behind those words began circulating among fans who dug deeper. They recalled past interactions, Jin shielding Jungkook at airports, Jin walking behind him like a silent wall. This wasn't just elder brother energy. This was protection at a visceral level. And now, as Jungkook stood alone on a massive American stage, it became clearer than ever. Jin wasn't just a hyung. He was a guardian. After the show, fans gathered outside the venue, still processing what they had witnessed. Not just the vocal power, the choreography, the intimacy, but the tension they didn't realize had been there all along. For many, it hit after the lights dimmed and the stage cleared. Jungkook had just performed under the kind of security detail typically reserved for presidents. Social media exploded once again. Hashtag Jin Protected Jungkook trended in multiple countries. Clips of bodyguards shadowing every movement were stitched into fan edits. Translations of Jin's request to Bigot went viral. But more than the shock, what dominated the discussion was Jin's love. His willingness to confront powerful executives. His courage to involve foreign authorities. His refusal to play it cool when his brother's life was possibly at risk. Journalists started calling it the most heavily protected concert of the year. Some mocked it, others defended it, but no one ignored it. Even Jimmy Fallon, who had briefly teased Jungkook's appearance on his show, subtly acknowledged it. Some artists walk with a team, he said. Jungkook walked with an army you couldn't see. And maybe that's what this was all about. Unseen threats. Invisible protection. Quiet actions driven by deep bonds. As of now, no public statement has been made by Jungkook or Jin about the exact nature of the threats or the details behind the security escalation. Bigot remains tight-lipped, only confirming that Jungkook's safety was, and always will be, our top priority. US officials declined to comment, but Army doesn't need confirmation. They saw enough. They felt the shift in tone, the energy, the silence between moments. They recognized the weight in Jungkook's eyes when he bowed extra deep after the encore. And they heard the tremble in his voice when he said, "I feel safe because I'm with you." That wasn't just fan service. That was a subtle message, one that hinted at something darker behind the glitz. And now, with more solo performances on the horizon, questions remain. Will every Jungkook show now require this level of security? Will Jin remain in the shadows, orchestrating safety like a silent commander? What exactly triggered this level of concern? And will it happen again? The only thing we know for sure is this. The music was flawless, the show unforgettable, but behind the spotlight stood a silent protector, and his name was Seokjin. He wasn't on stage, but he was part of every second. And in a world that constantly watches Jungkook, Jin made sure someone was watching over him too. If you want the story expanded into a full cinematic script or divided into multiple emotional chapters, I can build out more scenes, flashbacks, and inner monologues. Just say the word. The days following the concert in New York City were a whirlwind of headlines, fan speculation, and silent questions that no one dared ask out loud. But one thing was clear, Jungkook's return wasn't just a performance. It was a rescue mission in disguise, not from failure, not from obscurity, but from the unseen chaos that fame so often drags in its wake. And in the center of that mission stood a soldier who once wore a uniform, now cloaked in brotherhood. Jin's army didn't sleep that night. The fan cams, airport clips, and shaky videos from rooftops began surfacing faster than any news outlet could contain. But it wasn't Jungkook's vocals or the pyrotechnics that captured attention. It was what they missed during the show. The small hand signals between security members, the sniper-like silhouettes on top of adjacent buildings, and the black SUVs that never left the loading dock behind the arena. Something had been planned for this night, and something had been stopped. Rumors began to circulate that two individuals were detained near the backstage entrance, without proper credentials. Others said a Seokjin had tried to sneak in through a catering delivery truck hours before the show. But no confirmation ever came, only silence. And that silence was louder than anything else. Would it get confirmed accidentally? Was a short sentence in a deleted post from a freelance security contractor who'd worked at the venue. I've guarded high-value people before. Politicians, CEOs, even foreign royalty. But tonight, that young man was guarded like a nuclear asset. We weren't just hired. We were briefed by someone who wasn't from the company. That post lasted 47 minutes before disappearing. Screenshots went viral. All signs pointed to one person, Jin. He had not only asked for security, he had briefed them. This revelation changed everything for the fans. Jin, often seen as the funny Hyung, the worldwide handsome, idol with quick wit and laid-back energy, had transformed in the eyes of ARMY. He was now the strategist, the silent operator, the unseen backbone of protection behind Jungkook's emotional strength. Some fans recalled an old clip from a rundown of BTS's military updates. Jin, then still enlisted, had commented in passing, "After I'm out, I want to use what I learned to protect what matters most." Many thought he was joking, he wasn't. And in a world that increasingly blurred the line between idol and target, stage and battleground, Jin's instincts were not just accurate, they were life-saving. Behind the glamour of the New York stage, a war was being fought silently, not with guns, not with enemies in uniform, but with anticipation, surveillance, whispers in anonymous chat rooms, and the kind of obsessive threats that never made it to the front page, but lived in the inboxes of coordinators and management teams. Jungkook knew this. And still, he smiled. Still, he danced. Still, he poured his soul into every note. And that was what broke Jin days later. When Jin quietly returned to South Korea, fans noticed something unusual. No grand airport arrival.
No cameras.
No ARMY banners. Just a single, wide security ring that escorted him out silently. He looked tired, and when asked how he felt, he answered one sentence to a reporter brave enough to shout a question from the barrier. "I feel relieved." That was it, relieved, not proud, not excited, not emotional, relieved, because he had done it. Jungkook had come home safe. The concert had gone perfectly, and whatever fear had gnawed at Jin's soul leading up to that night, it had passed, at least for now. Meanwhile, in New York, media outlets started to dig deeper. One tabloid headline read, "K-pop's secret security operation. What really happened at Jungkook's show?" Another, "FBI involvement? The untold story of why Jungkook's concert was treated like a presidential visit." But neither HYB nor Jungkook made any statements, and that silence was confirmation enough. Because in K-pop, where image is everything, saying nothing often says the most. Back on Weverse, fans began leaving thousands of messages under Jin's profile. "Thank you, Hyung. You saved him. We saw what you did. ARMY will never forget." And though Jin never responded, many believe he saw them. That he read every message while sitting alone at night, maybe scrolling slowly, finally allowing himself to cry after keeping it all together for so long. But the story isn't over. There are rumors now of Jungkook doing a mini tour, Los Angeles, Tokyo, London. And every time a date is whispered, fans ask the same question. Will Jin be there? Because now, Jungkook's talent isn't the only thing they care about. Now, they want to know if someone is watching over him. If someone is making those late-night phone calls to security teams. If someone is saying, "No, that isn't safe enough." They want to know if Jin is watching. And Jin? He's watching everything from backstage, from a hotel room 2 blocks away, from a control center connected by a private channel, because love, when it's real, doesn't stop at applause. IT continues in silence. In preparation. In invisible walls no one ever sees, until the day they're needed. And for Jungkook, he will never perform alone again, because behind every note, every step, every spotlight, stands the man who vowed to protect him, Kim Seokjin. If you'd like me to write part 2 from Jungkook's emotional POV after the concert, his conversation with Jin, his fears, his gratitude, and what he really felt during the performance, just say the word. The screams had faded into the Manhattan skyline. The lights had dimmed. The echoes of Encore, Encore still pulsed in his ears like ghosts unwilling to leave. But Jungkook wasn't smiling anymore. He stood in the middle of that massive, now vacant arena, breathing hard, not from the choreography, not from the songs, but from something he hadn't told anyone. He had seen them, the shadows on the rooftop, the men with earpieces who weren't HYBE staff, the black bag placed behind his stage monitor for exactly 8 seconds before it was swept away by a security agent with no badge, and the look on one of his manager's faces, that look that told him something had been close. Too close. He never liked knowing, but he always knew. He sat on a crate behind the curtains, sweat still clinging to his jawline, stage makeup cracked slightly at the edges of his eyes. One hand rested over his chest, trying to still the drum of anxiety that had grown louder than the bass drops hours before. And then his phone buzzed. An O name. Just a contact saved with a single emoji. Hamster face Jin, you're safe. It's done. That was at point 2 sentences.
No emoji. No jokes.
No, you crushed it. Or you looked hot, or even congrats, Magne. Just you're safe. It's done. Jungkook stared at the screen like it was the only solid thing in the world. He knew Jin had been in New York. He hadn't seen him, not even once. Not backstage, not at the hotel, not during rehearsals. Jin had told him he'd stay back, that he'd be busy with something personal. But Jungkook knew. He always knew that something personal had been him. Jungkook closed his eyes. His mind replayed the conversation they had just days before flying to NYC. Are you nervous? Jin had asked on a video call. A little, Jungkook admitted. It's my first solo concert in America. That place is huge. You'll do fine, Jin said, but his eyes lingered a little too long. Hyung? Just make sure you don't go anywhere alone, okay? Especially not in the hotel lobby. And make sure you check your gifts this time. That last part hit hard, because it wasn't just advice. It was a warning. Back in Seoul, before enlistment, Jin had once found Jungkook curled up in their dorm studio after an incident involving a Seokjin. Someone had snuck something inside his mail. It hadn't hurt him physically, but emotionally, it wrecked him. Jungkook hadn't spoken for hours. He didn't go online for 2 days. That was the night Jin had told him, "When I get out of the army, I'll take care of this myself." Jungkook had laughed back then. What are you gonna do? Become my bodyguard? Now he wasn't laughing. He was sitting in the cold backstage air of a US arena, surrounded by bodyguards who didn't speak Korean, every move watched, every breath calculated, and the only person who'd made him feel truly safe hadn't even been present on the guest list. Jin had orchestrated it all behind the scenes, and Jungkook didn't know whether to be angry, grateful, or crushed that this is what love had become.
Silent. Strategic.
Sacrificial.